Hello and welcome to Verum Fabula Fellowship Podcast. I'm Wes Mullins.
And I'm Randy Hardman, and we will be your hosts today. It is our goal to bring you content that cultivates and enriches your daily interactions and encourages the refinement of character and intellect. The terrain we cover ranges from literature to philosophy to theology. It is our hope that through these lenses we can offer insight to the human experience and the human condition that is empowering and transformative.
Verum Fabula Fellowship is located in the beautiful town of Wilmore, Kentucky, and the podcast takes place at Drinkling's Roastery on Main Street. This is also where the fellowship meets regularly and where members are encouraged to present new thoughts and ideas, engage with interesting and important topics in discussion seminars, and interact with and listen to keynote speakers invited in to challenge us intellectually and spiritually. It is a true intellectual collective. Please rate this podcast on iTunes, and if we've said things that are helpful, be sure to tell your Lewis and Tolkien friends about us. With no more ado, here we go. Further up and further in. All right, hello and welcome to Verum Fabula Fellowship Review podcast. This is actually the Jack and Beren show. I am Jack.
I'm Beren.
He is Beren. He's not sure, but he thinks he is. And today we have a special guest. One of the fellowship members, Boromir, from Lord of the Rings. We have...
He's had an unfortunate fate, man.
Yeah. I was trying to think of somebody cool in the fellowship.
Ned Stark from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Sean Bean.
I'm just doomed on all counts here.
Yeah, yes. It's the incomparable David Whitaker. How's it going, man?
It is going okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so David's been a part of the fellowship pretty much since the inception of it. It was it's interesting because this friendship began through social media. If I'm getting this correctly.
Yeah, that's right. That's my
our
wives.
wives.
So, yeah.
Our wives were talking to each other through Instagram, and then, hey, we should meet up, our husbands, and we should hang out together. And we came to Drinkling's and had a several-hour-long conversation. And then I think it hinged on a little bit like, oh, Wes is starting a literary group about C.S. Lewis. And I think David was like, all right, yeah, I'd love to do that. And then from there, he's been a solid member of the fellowship. And has been a really cool addition and part of the core of the group. It's been fantastic. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, and what the fellowship means to you, and what you kind of hope to get out of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, but my main trade is film, and I've been moving around most of my life. Here. Connecticut, Florida, was born in California, lived most of my childhood in Indiana. Then I went back to California to work in the industry for a while, did a lot of the Hollywood things, and ended up in England, which is another thing we share in common. Got my master's there in sort of film producing, and now I'm back here teaching at Asbury University, teaching film, and all kinds of theoretical and practical film production stuff. So it's been a wild ride, but I like it a lot. And I'm a lifelong Inklings lover.
Awesome.
By a lot. From birth, yeah. My dad indoctrinated me very young. Actually, I think it might have been my mom with Narnia, really, because she got me started on Narnia when I was like 5 or 6 or 7, really young, to the point where I was surprised I even understood the analogous language in it.
Yeah,
so,
a little bit. Even tough for adults there. So.
Yeah, I think I would have been a better child if my parents would have read Narnia to me, but
me too, man.
They didn't. I had Lord of the Rings. My dad loved that book. When I got a little older, he's like, "Oh, this is a great book, Lord of the Rings." But I didn't discover Lewis until my 30s.
So. I got squat, man. My parents, they might be listening now. I got nothing of that, so I had to discover that on my own.
So it's awesome. Yeah, you had the positive indoctrination.
Yeah.
Maybe it's we call it not a inoculation. Maybe that's what we said. Inoculation
yeah.
there with Narnia coming in.
Do you think that it all shaped your kind of gravity in life towards film and?
I would say without a doubt, yeah, without a doubt, towards story, because it all centers around story for me, and in the way that Lewis shapes stories, in particular for a young mind, helps you kind of see the world in a different way, and you kind of see everything for maybe what it is inside rather than what it is outside, and for me that's how it worked. But also my dad was, he's a philosophy guru, and he's taught philosophy at high levels, and he's doctor of, I don't know, he's got like 1,000 degrees. But anyway, he's always talked to me growing up. He started talking to me about Plato when I was 8.
Come on.
So that was pretty early, but I loved it, and Lewis fit in there really, really well. So it was just, it shaped my entire life, really.
Then I'm really happy that I've had conversations with my kids about that.
Yeah.
So, as a kid, if you can remember, I don't know if you can remember or not this, but Alistair McGrath talks about the way Lewis creates Narnian stories and how influential it is for children, and it's one of these things that they may not see right away. But you have fairy tales where you have the big bad wolf, you have like the Wizard of Oz, you have the Wicked Witch of the West. Lewis says, here's the White Witch. You have no idea whether she's good or she's bad. It's a White Witch. You have all these characters that are introduced, and you only come to know their motivations and their character by their actions and behaviors in the story, and you know who to trust based on their behaviors. And so Alistair McGrath says Lewis is teaching us how to be observant and how to look for clues in those things and come to the revelations ourselves, as opposed to being told by the narrator and just trust the narrator, because the narrators are not always honest. Mm-hmm. They're not always forthright. And so just because they say, well, this is the big bad wolf, well, might not be true. They may be a dishonest narrator. Any thoughts on that?
I think you encapsulated it pretty well. No.
Well, how did you pick up on that as a child, or did that have any influence on you? Now, looking back, can you be introspective, look back and say, yeah, maybe that did kind of shape some of my observational skills?
You know what it actually did shape in terms of my observational skills was the character of Edmund. The idea that one can be redeemed from such deep betrayal, that was huge for me.
Wow.
And I never really thought anyone was all the way gone. So that was interesting to me, I guess, looking back on it. And I don't think I really actually connected that fully until just now, which is kind of cool. But yeah, he did basically the worst of the worst, betrayed his family and the equivalent of God, and that altogether really is really, really, how do you come back from that? And then at the same time, he does, and he comes back to be better than he was, and he's now Edmund the Just because of the place that he was. And even for a kid, that's like, oh no, anyone can be redeemed.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I think probably shaped the way I look at people, especially people who are in society's view just degenerates. And I've always had actually an interest in prison ministry and stuff like that, even though I've never been able to actually be involved in it. I've tried a couple of times, and I keep getting swept up into, hey, can you do this video project instead? Right. I get it tied in with the ministry, but it's fine. But I don't look at people who have committed even the most severe crimes as too far gone now, and I wonder if that doesn't stem from that character and the way that Lewis kind of presents him in almost a completely neutral way, and then you just see how his arc goes along.
I think the way that he touches on that, like you said, the name Just, right? Edmund the Just. I don't think I ever connected that with justification, but I think that's,
wow.
Gives a good, you think of, okay, Edmund the Just is, he's starting to live a life of nobleness, of fairness, of justice and stuff like that. But that probably becomes a retroactive term to say it's not earned. It is a name that is given. You know,
Yeah.
you become just
Ooh, yeah.
through that. You know, and so
we could draw maybe Jacob and Israel type thing here. You know,
Yeah.
name change, which brings about this character change as well. Like, you know, and that. And what I think is amazing is, as I'm thinking about Narnia, and I go to the White Witch coming through and saying, you know the magic, you know the laws on the tablets and on the stone that say that anybody who betrays, they're my property. And Aslan allows it to go forward. And I think back to the scripture where Jesus says, if the princes of this world had known, they would not have crucified me.
yeah,
And it's like he set it up. It's like it was set up so that there was no way, there was no way for Satan to win. Like there was no way for him to win. This game was loaded dice from the beginning.
yep,
And the Wicked Witch comes through, and she thinks she has this great advantage, and then she doesn't. And to me, it's not the sense of like predestination kind of comfort, but it's the thought of God's already thought of everything, and there's no way that the enemy can trick him into losing. There's no way he can lose this thing. Mm-hmm. It's a loaded game, and so as reading that as an adult, reading that and going, yeah, he leaves nothing to chance here. Even our deepest, darkest place we could go to, and Psalms it says, if I make my bed in hell, he's there.
Right.
And I think that could infuse children with a lot of security and oh yeah, I can trust in Aslan.
Yeah, the hope is extremely palpable, and it's I don't know, it's more or less. It gives me confidence even when I'm talking to people who are at in the pit of despair. You know that you can come out of it, even in death, and that's such a triumphant hope. And I don't think if we didn't have that set up for us, I think our faith would look quite different, because it really does change everything for us. That hope exists, and without it, it would be, I don't know if it would be even remotely the same.
So if we pull from what you said there and we go back to like a story like a Frozen 2, because we talked about it last time, and just this thing of where here's this great call to adventure, and then you have this amazing story, and it's you're floating on the air, it's bringing you in, it's this hope-filled thing, and they go, and you're the answer, and then suddenly it just completely bottoms out. What do you think that actually? Let's compare and contrast. So you have Narnia, that Aslan's already got this thing figured out. There's no way for him to lose. There's redemption whenever you come to redemption, and it's going to be there for you. And because there's someone greater than you that's taken, he's already thought of everything, and then you come to, hey, there's this great call to adventure. There's this great hope inside of you, and it's you. Compare and contrast what you think that does to a psyche of a child.
I think it betrays the psyche of the child, to be honest, because and in the end, a person is going to come along and they're going to realize about, I'd say kind of the coming of age of their life, wherever that lands. It might be different for everybody, but they're going to realize, no, you aren't the answer. You are flawed, and you can never achieve perfection on your own. Like, even if you don't want to readily admit that to yourself, inside you can't. And the fact that you can't save yourself, and that deep down inside, is a betrayal of that psychological bent that you are okay, or that you are the answer, because you can't be, and you can't be on your own. And so when that comes into, I don't know, that when you come into maturity and you look at that, you might realize that's a lie, and now what do I have?
you become despair.
Yeah,
That's
despond.
And I think Lewis makes a big deal about, like the appetites and how those become fulfilled through something that is given to us. And I think one thing I'm picking up on, David, you're saying is like we do have this innate kind of sense. It's not just, social order and, the super ego and, all that kind of stuff, but there's this innate sense in us from children that we are supposed to be, that we're made to be a certain way, but it is something that we can never manage to achieve. And just, I know a lot of people that get into adulthood, and you see it in your own sin, you see it in your own addictions, that it's a question of like, do I just give up?
Yeah.
Because this thing keeps conquering me, even though I hate it. It's Romans, 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
7 or 11. I don't remember which, but 7, I think. But I don't want this, but I do it anyways. And it's like, why?
And I want to do this, but I can't do it.
But I can't do it. Yeah.
It's that catch-22, that paradox that you're wrapped
so
up
you
in.
either go, Paul starts nausea and just say you do your best in life and get through it, or
and that's not the recipe for human flourishing, because it's despair. And then you lose your why. Even Nietzsche said, if you can figure out a why, you can survive any how.
Oh yeah.
And so if you look at that, you say, well, if I just reconcile myself to it's a brute fact, there's injustice, and I just need to suck it up until I cease to exist. Like that doesn't instill hope. That doesn't even instill some kind of resolve.
Right.
That sort of undercuts everything, and you're just like, well, this sucks.
Yep.
Which is why I think for myself, when I read Narnia, The Last Battle is probably the most impactful book. I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but I think it's the most impactful to me, because I think Shift is just a jerk. And I can't stand how maniacal he is. Lewis paints him so well. But the funny thing is no matter how maniacal he is, there was somebody more maniacal behind him pulling the strings. And that's what you get if you lose hope, because it's all about what you can gain in the present moment. But at the end, when Father Time wakes up and he takes time and he just crushes it into nothing, and then they're in real Narnia, and the book ends with probably the greatest line a fairy tale can end with, that their story to this point was simply the title page and the preface. Mm-hmm. The best is yet to come. That rings true in that desire that I have inside of me, that innate desire that goes, no, that rings of truth. There is something beyond. There's something greater. There's something that actually can pull me out further up and further in this. And I think as an adult reading that, I was like, no, this. If there were a supreme being who created the entire world and had omniscience, he would create in me a desire like this that could sustain me through whatever suffering that I'm going through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is crazy because, you think about the resiliency of kids in suffering, right? And I know this personally true, it's an extremely powerful testimony to faith and to the goodness of children. There's one of the worst things you can ever do to a kid is say you're a bad kid. Like we have definitely bad adults. We have bad human beings. And some kids are on a spectrum of OCD or oppositional defiance and conduct and stuff like that. And there's definitely challenges that could be there. But one of the worst things that you can do, because it labels and it prescribes, is call a kid a bad kid. Yeah. So then that seeps into their narrative and their worldview, really limits what they can do. And I think like when Jesus, he speaks very bluntly about kids in that regard. He says, basically, don't mess with them. Number one, and number two, have the faith of little children. Through your suffering, through your resilience, see that through their eyes. You got that hope and you got that disposition and that orientation. And I think sometimes we really do just get trapped in the pollution that we grow up with and adopt into our world view that just says, you're broken and therefore you will always be broken. There's nothing beyond that.
Wow.
It's like, man, if we can nix that,
It's no wonder. I mean, we have a lot of reasons for teen depression these days, but it does make more sense when you have severe bullying in schools and things like that. And I think it's in some ways I pity the bullies more because they're so desperate for something better than what they've known, that they feel the need to get pleasure out of inflicting pain into other people's lives. And what your soul has to be, what state your soul has to be in at that point to want to do that, implies to me basically what you're saying, that someone at some point said to them, "You're a bad kid."
Yeah.
And then the lack of hope there, combined with the negative sort of reinforcement, and then the lack of hope, what must that then propel them to do to other people?
Well, you become reduced.
Yeah.
You become reduced to something, and if you believe that you are reduced to that thing, then you are limited by that thing, by that label,
Yeah.
And that's, kids, I mean, we tell them all the time, you have the whole world ahead of you. You can do anything that you want to do, be anything that you want to be. And yet we have a culture that says that, and then duplicitously, comes around and says, but you can't, and you aren't, and you are these things. And I'm a parent, so I'm very passionate about this right now.
No, I think,
I just think we need more of that. I mean, even dealing with this whole, this, we're dated right now on the whole crappy coronavirus thing, and people are panicking and freaking out and stuff like that. And yet my kids, I asked them yesterday, "Are you guys worried?" And they said, "No, we're okay." And they'll just go off and they'll play and they'll enjoy their extended spring break. And
you've given them the environment to go, "Dad's got this."
Yeah, their emotional security is still intact, whereas everybody else is bathing in hand sanitizer. It's
So I'm in my own life, I'm trying to, and if my stepmother's listening to this, I apologize. But
we're going to offend all of our parents here, Dave.
But growing up, I grew up very, very much like that in a sense of being labeled by your behaviors, and so I was a kid looking for attention, whether it was good or bad. I wanted to get attention, and so you do the bad behavior, almost subconsciously do the bad behavior, and then I go, "Aha, that is you. You are this way," and then you don't feel like you can get out of that. And I realized in my own kids, because there's a scripture that always puzzled me in the sense of, children obey your parents, and that's the one that's always quoted to you as kids. Obey your parents. But the other part of another scripture says, "But fathers, don't cause your children to be frustrated."
Yep.
And you go, "Ooh." So it's not just one. That's not just a one-sided thing. It's like, husbands love your wives, wives submit to your. It's like, oh, it's an equity there. It's like there's different responsibilities. And so what I've begun to do in my kids' life, and I start to see fruit of this, is I've always said my no's are loud, but I want my yeses to be loud or louder.
Right.
And every day I tell my kids, every day I look them in the eyes, and we're strict with our disciplines, but I tell them what amazing people they are and what amazing people they're going to be, and tell them how much I love them every day and look in their eyes. I didn't get that growing up. So I still wrestle with identity. I still wrestle with those things, and I want my kids to have that environment where they can be, "Oh, I can screw up huge here. He's got me."
Yeah.
And I can mess up, but my parents had me, and they still think I'm amazing. The rest of the world can think I'm whatever, but I can look in my dad's eyes, and he believes 100% that I'm an amazing person, and that I'm okay. And I'm trying to instill that in them.
That's interesting. I can't remember. I think I can't remember sometimes that my parents said that to me. For sure. But I also have a very, very bad memory. So, but it's like I know they believe that about me.
Yeah.
I know they always have my back. I need to ask them what in the world they did to make me feel that, because I can't honestly tell you what it was that they did. Maybe it was the actions that they took rather than the words that they said. I'm not sure.
You mean to make you feel secure?
Yeah, I always felt secure. I always felt like they had my back. I felt like, I could really blow it and they would be pretty upset and disappointed, but they weren't going to cast me out, or they weren't going to make me, weren't going to disown me or anything to that extent. I knew they always had my back, even when I totally blew it. But it was, I have no idea what they did to make me feel that.
I think sometimes it can come down to the lack of what is said, a lot of the times, and then other ways of communication. I mean, this in film is that, sometimes words are only one way that we communicate. There's a multitude of other ways that we communicate, and, I think that's important too, because you could be saying, like, you're a great child, but then every other part of your communication,
all the nonverbals,
is just betraying that.
Which causes the kid to go, I can't trust that.
Yeah, I mean the true art is to be able to point out like sin in a kid's life, and through those other nonverbals and other ways of communicating, so that they know, even though you're saying what you're saying, and it could be taken to mean you're a bad child, you're a bad kid, something like that, all the shame-producing things. But if they can see through all those other kind of nonverbals and your other ways of communicating, that even in the midst of saying that it is said out of love, it is said out of like a desire for you to be more,
Yeah. Well, bringing that back to even Aslan in the Narnia series, every time he came to one of the children and basically told them they were doing wrong, he didn't have to say almost anything.
Yeah.
Remember that? He would just look at them, and they would just know.
Yeah, like, oh.
They would just know, but they would also know how much he loved them. And it was, it's one thing to say, do that for your children, because how do you communicate the entirety of Christ's spirit in a look? But it's still...
I've got it down.
This is why I'm growing up my main, man.
There you go.
But it's still like the way he did it, the way he went about it, his language that he did use when he did use it was always so affirming, but also strong, and this discipline is for your good.
Well, I've actually used some of his language, and it's so powerful. So my kids will start to ask questions about somebody else. Even like Alex will go something about Eliana, and I'll just look at him and go, "That's not your story." And it hits him. He's like, "Oh yeah, avarice." She was asking about, and Shasta were asking about each other, and Aslan just said, "That's not your story. It's not. You don't need to worry about that. That's not about you." And so he hits that. And he just pulls back. He's like, he's satisfied with, okay, I don't need to gossip about this or do that's not part of your story. But William Paul Young says something in his there's a documentary, Heart of Man. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, Heart of Man, Tony Anderson, and they made this. So William Paul Young's talking about his understanding of, because he talked to this lady about why she says, this lady talked to him and says, I can always trust Satan because he tells me exactly what he means. And he goes, if you go back to the garden, when the serpent is talking to Eve, what he says to her is, you can't trust him. He's not who you think he is. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, that concept, that feeling is innate in us. Can I trust my parents? Because they say one thing, they say I'm good, but their behavior says I'm bad. And then that gives the enemy plenty of room to come in and say this, they're not who they think you are. They're not who you think they are. Hypocrites. Yep. And then that causes distrust, and that discord and that disunity comes in there. And so you see Aslan bringing it right back, always bringing it back, and giving the correct thing with the correct behaviors. Even though he's not a tame lion, he's safe. I mean, sorry, he's not. He's good. He's not safe. He's good, and that's what I want to reflect for my children. Is I'm not tame. I have emotions. I have outbursts, but I'm trying to be good. And when I'm not, I come and go, yeah, guys, I screwed up. That was daddy. That was bad on me. I completely blew that one. Can you guys forgive me? That was wrong.
Right.
Yeah. And to give you guys some hope, even though I'm not a parent, I do know this part. Even when you do screw it up, the child can still come back and look back at the situation years later when they're an adult, and they can say, they didn't do right, but I do know that they still loved me and they were trying their best. And they were doing it out of what they thought was love, even though they weren't stepping in the quite the right manner.
Oh God, man, that's the daily prayer. Of
Yeah.
the parent. It's
Yeah.
God, I hope that they have amnesia about this.
Yeah.
Please, thank God they
Exactly.
remember things.
One of my pastors used to say, we would tell our kids when they got older, we did our best and we're sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's about it.
But a lot of it just goes to show, like, memory is not so much about the things that you remember here in your head. I pointed to my head, as much as what you remember here.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's why I like attachment psychology is so big, for young kids, to feel that security, even though they'll never remember those first formative years. But it is one of the things that shapes their entire world from, on out. So, I mean, hence, you remember some aspects of Narnia, but you really remember as a 5-year-old how that felt. And that helped you remember certain things, but at the same time, like, it was this feeling of, like, disposition is oriented this way.
Yeah. One of the things Alex, when he read Narnia, because my son's a voracious reader, and he read Narnia, and he said that when he came to the line and Mr. Beaver says, Aslan's on the move, he said, Daddy, my cheeks exploded and my hair got tight. And I was like, what an expression of feeling that echo of a tune not heard, that call, that security and that thing, that even as a 7-year-old, he felt the power of God in reading that, like, this is truth. And he's, I think he's going to be a great writer. His stories are just fantastic. And I think because we introduced him to Narnia, we introduced him to Harry Potter, we introduced him to great literature, and it's ingrained in who he is. He used to listen to classical music as a child. Now he's a little more hip hop now. He's got that influence.
Now he's rubbing off on my son.
Yeah,
rubbing off on each other.
So our Randy and I, our kids go to school together, and they're in the same class, and so they listen to a lot of NF and what's the guy's name? Something B, KB or something, and
I have no idea.
And that's good.
I know I'm getting old.
Yeah, it's good because I know his foundation is in the classical. His foundations are in the classics, and he can go out and explore those things. But those things, he always comes back to the classics because he'll realize that, well, this rap is good. It moves me a little bit, but then, like, only surface. When he hears the classical music, when he hears those things, it still goes back and it's that drawl, it's that pull to go further up and further in. But I think we're going to wrap up today. We have got to...
a great conversation on flatlands.
Yes, we really hit flatlands hard. What I like about this podcast that we have here is that we just kind of take whatever trail we're going, whether we're going to go through the flatlands of Mordor, and or where we're going to go, we never know. It's going to be an adventure and a journey. And it was awesome to have David on with us today. He is an integral part of the fellowship that meets on Monday, and we hope to have more of the fellowship on here. And hopefully coming up soon, we'll have some other guests like a Devin Brown and a Michael Peterson, and who knows who else we can have on here. But these conversations are fantastic. And I have been Jack today.
I've been Beren.
And David has been
Sean Bean.
Bean. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.